Woo! Hello, it's been quite a week. Well, I wanted to tell you, today we're doing something a little different. I pulled some plants out of this tank here. It's all in a bucket. I basically filled up a 5-gallon bucket. I'm going over to my friend's house to set up one of their tanks, or set up a tank for them. They had this tank before and it didn't quite work out. So what they've done is they've cleaned it all out and I'm going to go over there. We're going to set it up. It'll be a lot of fun. Hey YouTube, this is pecktec, and I'm about to come over. I'm just waiting on Holly to come home, and then we're going to go over to my buddy's house. Now, these are two of my gaming friends. We play a lot of board games together, and we hang out quite a bit. Now, they've had an aquarium going for a long time, and I think recently they just kind of had a problem with it. It kind of just sat there in the corner, and they do what a lot of new people do with aquariums. You know, they got the standard Marinland kit. They didn't plant it, they just, threw some decorations in there, and that's perfectly fine. But I kind of like to show them another way to do it. I want to show them how beautiful having a really nice, natural aquarium is, and I've done a lot of stuff to kind of help make their Marinland Bowfront tank a little bit better. Now, if memory serves, what I'm working with here is like a 30-gallon Marinland Bowfront tank. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the old Kessel light that used to be on there, I'm going to take that over with me. I've got a gooseneck. I've got, well, let's just look through some of these supplies. Right, so I've got an air pump in here actually, because I was thinking about maybe doing some sponge filters. I've got some wood. I've got some different kinds of substrate. A lot of this is leftovers from the Blackwater tank. Got some tools and some chemicals, to treat water and stuff and clean the glass. A lot of plants. I don't know if you can tell, but this is pretty much chock full of plants. Got the little Kessel gooseneck, towel, of course, always bring a towel, more dechlorinator, some hoses, and I actually boiled up some botanicals, because I've got so many. I got tons of the Blackwater stuff. So I boiled up some botanicals, and they're soaking in here. We'll pull that out later. And on top of that, of course, I've got the camera stuff to take, and maybe a couple of lights and stuff like that. So what I probably ought to do is pack all this stuff up, the stuff that I'm holding in my hand, as well as some of this other stuff. I want to get this all ready so we can get over to the house. Okay, so this is what I was doing the night before I went over, and that is trimming the 27-gallon cube. Now, this aquarium hasn't had a good trim in probably a year or more, and I use this tank as I call it my farm tank. And the reason I do is just because it's a really, really productive tank, and I just let it grow. And I'll let the specimens get to, I'll let them get to a really decent size. And then I pull them out in larger chunks. Now, you've got to be careful. You don't want to pull out, especially with a tank that's gotten this overgrown, you don't want to pull out most of the plants. You can do, I went for like 40%. and I basically just kind of went around the perimeter of the middle of this tank. And I really opened up a lot of light to kind of come down and get to some of these other plants. Some of the plants were having a hard time not seeing a lot of light, and others were doing pretty good. Now, the reason you don't want to pull out too many plants is you can kind of shock the system and cause the tank to have some issues, but there's still more than enough plants in this tank for it to do well. And I ended up with a huge bucket of plants to take over and use as some of my resources for this project. But like I said, there's still tons and tons of plants in there, and it's a better looking tank now. Now, here we are over at the Cokers. They've got a Marinland. This is a 30-gallon Bowfront tank. You've probably seen me set up a tank similar to this before. I set one up. My sister had one here at the house, and I kept it for a while. It's a pretty neat little aquarium. And I wanted to set it up in a really similar way that I set up the cube. In fact, I even brought over the light that I used to have over the top. If you notice from the beginning there, that's a Kessel light. And that's one of the older Kessel lights. It's the one I originally put on my 27-gallon cube. And what I'm doing here for a substrate is just sort of a mixture of some things that I had. It's all leftovers, of course. The bottom stuff, of course, is fluorite, left over from the Blackwater Flex tank. And so is the sand. That sand is also left over. And the other stuff, I'd gotten one bag of this stuff that's sort of made with supposedly volcanic material, and I thought that was really interesting. So I like the color and the texture of it, so I sort of mixed it in too. The fluoride will give it a really good base, a little crunchy layer for the roots. The other stuff is supposedly good for plants. The volcanic stuff is supposedly good for plants. And the sand is mostly filler. I really like planting with sand and stuff like that. That Caribsea sand is actually kind of expensive for what it is, but it's a nice fine brown sand that kind of mixed well with these other things. I eventually will add another layer of substrate, but that's kind of at the very end after I planted it a little bit. Now for the hardscape, you see, I'm using a bunch of wood, and all of this wood is wood that I have from I've had from other projects. And in fact, 2 of those pieces of wood are from my very first planted tanks. And it's been sitting on my shelf for a long time. It's old manzanita wood. Well, I think one of them is spider wood, and another is manzanita wood. But they've both been in aquariums for over 10 years or so. Now they're dried out, so there's no benefit of bacteria. They're just interesting bits of hardscape that are going to help kind of form a stage. What I like to do when I do an aquascape is to sort of leave a low area in the front to kind of be this stage for the fish or whatever, whatever's in there. Just kind of like a presentation area. And then I kind of build up as tall as I can towards the back. There's a really odd mixture of plants in here. I think there's a lot of neat stuff that's kind of going to look good together. Now, all the plants that I added here are fairly easy to deal with, and if they wanted to, they could just let these plants grow and grow and grow and never really have to worry about trimming them very much at all. There's a few plants that might need a little bit of a trim now and then, but these are a great set of beginner plants to hopefully give them early success. Now, another thing that I added to this tank are some botanicals. I've got tons of these botanicals, and I boiled up a selection of these to bring in. And I have to say, every time I add these to a tank, I'm always like, oh, wow, it just really finishes it off. It makes it really interesting. Now, Nace doesn't have a python or anything, so we had to use gravity to fill this thing up. But eventually we did get it filled up, and it was a little muddy. I'd say a little muddy overall. So here we are 1 week later. Now, I added a sponge filter to this. I wanted to make sure that the filtration was a really simple thing and they wouldn't have to worry so much about water level and noise and that sort of thing. And it seems to be doing a great job. There are a couple of things that I want to change, though. And the first thing is I want to put a black background on. So I'm adding that now. And what a black background will do is it really makes those plants pop out. It also enables you to hide all the cords and other things that might be going on behind it. Now, I really like the look of this, especially with the botanicals, but I thought it might be interesting to mix in some more stone. So I've got these sort of really natural, they're browns and tans and stuff like that, these in different sizes and shapes of these rocks. To me, another layer of rocks like this just makes it a little bit more interesting to look at. It'll also help anchor some of these new plants too, and I poured a generous amount on some of the especially big clumps in case they kind of get pulled out in the next couple of weeks before the roots get established. Also added a heater after I used it to push some rocks around. And yeah, this tank is ready to go. So over the next few days, I'm going to bring over some fish and kind of get their aquarium really started with some animals in there. We're going to start really slow, and I'm going to teach them about cycling a tank. But look for that in a future update. Okay, so how about you guys? Have you ever gone over to a friend's house to set up a tank? Let me know in the comments down below. Until next time, follow your bliss, keep a clean tank, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye. I don't think I've seen this fish here before.
It's like I was just talking about you. Hi.
Hello.
Say hi to pecktec, everyone.
Hey, are you live streaming?